So, welcome to the Armchair Trader podcast. This week we have a special edition for you because we're going to be talking about the Master Investor Show, which the Armchair Trader will be attending on the 19th of March. And we have Tim Corcoran here, who we're going to talk to a little bit more about the show this year, which is a welcome return to an event that's on many UK investors' calendars. Welcome to the show, Tim, first of all.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 19th.
Yeah, well, looking forward to being there. So the Master Investor Show returning in live format this year. Can you quickly give us a quick summary of it for people who are not familiar with it and haven't been there before?
Absolutely. As you say, it's the first time back in physical form since 2019, which feels like a long, long time. But I think I'm very excited to get back into the Business Design Centre in Islington. To sum it up, it is the single largest event for private investors in the UK. It might be the largest in Europe for all I know. I haven't done the research to back that one up, but it's got the full spectrum of investment content and companies. So all the way from the very largest trusts and funds like JP Morgan, all the way down to brand new companies who are just starting out looking for investment. Every sector you could imagine. We've got 3 stages with, I think, about 30 or 40 talks across the 3. It's all in all, I think that I would hope there is something in it for everybody.
So it would suit, what you're saying is it would suit anyone if you're a beginner investor or somebody who maybe only just started trading during lockdown and has never set foot there before. There's going to be something for them, as well as the seasoned veteran who has been running a portfolio for many years.
Absolutely. I think one of the things we will often say to people is you may agree, you may not, but in order to be a successful investor, the key is an open mind and a willingness to do your due diligence. This is an opportunity to do that. We have educational talks from people who can talk about the how of investing. But more than that, we've got a lot of companies where the senior management are there looking to meet investors. You can look them in the eye, judge them for yourself, find out, is this a company that I want to put my money into? We've got some of the leading investors in the world. So our chairman, Jim Mellon, will be speaking on the main stage, and his talks always go down particularly well, I think, because he talks about the macro themes that will influence everybody's portfolios over the next 12 to 18 months, but he also gives serious detail about what he's putting his money into and why. So talks like this, I think they offer a lot of value, whether you're the most experienced investor on the planet or you're brand new to it.
Yeah, I remember Jim from his days years and years ago when he was an emerging markets fund manager in the 1990s. Apart from him, he's obviously a high-profile one. Can you say anything more about other speakers you have on the day?
Absolutely. So we've got on the main stage, we've got some fairly big names, really. So we've got Guy Anderson of JP Morgan. So I think that will be a good one. He spoke at our virtual event back in 2020 when COVID made us go online, and that went down particularly well. It got a lot of very positive reviews. So I think that will be good. We're actually kicking off the day with a sort of a stage setter, which is going to be hosted by Wilfred Frost. We've got some really good panelists on his discussion. We've got a talk a bit later on from Quoted Data, I should say, which is going to be looking at the sort of property through an investment trust perspective. The main stage will finish with a talk on what we've termed the agrarian revolution, which is an absolutely cutting-edge sector looking at alternative proteins, essentially looking at cultivated meat, potentially plant biotech and that sort of thing. So it's really right on the edge. It's probably a subject that a lot of investors don't know a huge amount about at the moment, but it has enormous potential to shape our world in the coming years.
Are there any new newcomers in terms of companies or speakers or firms supporting the event that you think are particularly interesting for investors to come and have a look at this year?
Absolutely, yes. I think we've got. I mean, it depends a little bit upon the sector that you're you're most excited about. But we've got some of the biggest trusts and funds, Blue Whale, Aberdeen. We've got small cap companies looking at sort of mining and biotech and aviation. So we've got companies like Avation who have been coming year after year, and they always get an excellent reception from our audience. But equally, we've got companies like Cytox who have never been to the event before. They're a sort of a cutting-edge genomics company. I think some of the work they're doing is mind-blowing, frankly. If you told me a few years ago what was possible, it stems from the realms of science fiction, but it's real. So I think they're a particularly interesting company to come along and hear from.
And from your perspective, I mean, what we've seen certainly in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more investor interest in sort of non-traditional areas. I mean, obviously within technology, a lot of people have been interested in the likes of the big technology plays like Tesla, but we've seen a lot more interest at our end in things like biotech, and also, companies either with some exposure to next generation payment systems or next generation ways of doing financing. From your perspective, as you're sitting there, you're organizing this big event. Are you seeing any interesting trends coming through in terms of the companies you're talking to, and indeed feedback from delegates asking you, can we see some more of this?
It's interesting actually, because obviously it's a fairly interesting time at the moment, and I guess there's two parts to the answer to that question. On the one hand, people have always come to our event looking for the interesting investments, the ones that potentially will get them a significant return. And biotech, as you rightly say, is right up there. So companies like Agronomics, companies like Juvenescence, looking at sort of things that if you read them in a science fiction book, as I said earlier, that they wouldn't look out of place, but they've got real products out there, and they're making a real difference to the way people live their lives now. So things like that, certainly people will come along and they will certainly hear something new from companies like this. On the flip side, I think, I'm sure it's something you'll have observed as well, but there is that general move away from growth stocks towards value stocks. Some of the more traditional ones, companies which are sort of potentially looking to offer dividends and payouts sooner rather than later. And a number of the small cap companies that are presenting are going to be in that position. We've got a number of sort of mining companies, for example, who are sort of already turning out profits and able to pay dividends. So there is probably both ends of the spectrum. And as always, I guess it comes down to people's appetite for risk, and the time frame that they're working towards. But hopefully, I would suggest if no matter what their sort of personal priorities are, they should be able to find companies and investments and probably themes and talks which will really help to inform their strategy over the coming months and years.
Anything on green energy, next generation energy, because that's always a big one with our readership and our listeners.
Not a great deal, actually. We have in the past had a number of companies on that area, but for whatever reason, I think the companies in that sector were looking a little bit shy this year. It may well just be that the current circumstances, as everyone's moving towards, hard sort of oil and gas and things like that at the moment, that may have been a factor. I don't know.
Obviously, the last time you did this was spring of 2019, and then you had to go online for 2020. Coming back to it now as a live event, and getting companies and speakers in. What would you say has been the big changes since 2019, when we last had a physical Master Investor show? I mean, what's changed since the pandemic came in, and what has the pandemic changed?
It's a very good point. I think one of the things that we observed over the last 2 years was the substantial growth of the private investor community. Now, that's partly, I think, because people were, stuck at home trying to think what to do, and I guess that they hadn't been financially damaged in quite the way that might have been under other circumstances. So they had time and they had money to play with a little bit. But there's also the flip side of the technology, which has enabled far greater private investor involvement. And because of that technology, investors are better informed and they are far more agile and better able to put their money into things that interest them. So the result has been a substantial growth in the community that we serve, and I suspect the same is true for you guys. And as you alluded to earlier, when you've got that sort of growth, you've obviously got a lot of people who are relatively new to it, looking for ideas, looking for a bit of guidance, which we want to sort of try and provide. And at the same time, you've got a lot of established, experienced investors who've been doing it for years and have fairly clear-cut ideas about what they're looking for. And the aim of the Master Investor Show has always been to provide that sort of full spectrum day, a single day of the year where I hope that you can really make it count. And 6 months down the line, you'll be thinking, well, I'm glad I was there because I picked up some really useful information.
I guess it's a great opportunity to get a lot of interesting companies under one roof in one day, and also hear some excellent presentations as well. It would take you a long time to gather all that information otherwise, even if you were sitting at home in front of your computer.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the talks themselves, I think we've got a really high quality list of speakers and presentations, and there's choices. There'll be multiple talks on at any one time, and you can choose the ones that you want to attend. But the other thing, which for private investors is very hard to come by, is the ability to actually meet the management of these companies. Now, if you're an institutional investor, often the management of small cap listed companies, they'll be queuing up to meet you. If you're a private investor, often as not, they are far less enthused about the prospect. Events like the Master Investor Show give private investors access that institutional investors probably take for granted a little bit.
And also, many of these CEOs are not necessarily based in your backyard, are they? I mean,
No. That has certainly been one of the challenges compared to, say, 2019, which is obviously that international travel has only recently started to open up again. So we've got people coming in from Australia, from Canada, Singapore. These are not people that are easily accessible on a sort of a daily basis. I know we've got one CEO who is, as we speak, I think, is in Nicaragua. He's flying back for the show, and then flying back to Nicaragua again. He's coming because he wants to speak to and meet our audience and talk to them and hopefully impress them. And certainly, if you look just 6 months ago, I wasn't sure this was going to be possible. We had a lot of people, particularly, for example, from Australia, where travel restrictions were so draconian that there's absolutely no guarantee that they'd be able to get back into the country if they left.
That's very true, actually. I'd forgotten about the Australian situation, but you're right. It's been very hard to meet any Australian CEOs for the last couple of years. One of the things I observed, I was at the London Trader Show. One of the things that interested me was there were a lot more younger investors there, younger traders, people in their 20s.
Yeah,
a lot more than you're used to seeing at this kind of a show. Is that something you're anticipating for the Master Investor Show as well? Because it does seem that there's a bigger appetite from sort of under 35 investors now who weren't in the market before.
Absolutely. No, I was at the London Trader Show for a little while as well, and I noticed the same thing. There are people who sort of look particularly fresh-faced. Maybe feel quite old. It's interesting because speaking to them, they have a very different perspective on what they're looking for. And so things like crypto, for example. So when people sign up to the show, we often ask a few questions to try and make sure that we're putting on the right sorts of content to appeal to them. I think for the first time, certainly in my time involved with Master Investor, we had more people saying they were interested in crypto than in bullion. Now, to be fair, gold has had a sort of a strong run thanks to recent events, so that may well change. But I think the interests and the nature of the audience is evolving, and it's in some cases it can be quite stark.
No, that's true. And I guess there's a lot of investors who maybe have got in because of the meme stocks and the insanity around GameStop and are now looking at other options as well because they're becoming more familiar with the market and looking at other choices.
Yeah, and I think the meme stocks was an interesting thing. I'm putting that down to a sort of temporary craziness induced by lockdown. I think all the companies that we've got they're definitely not meme stocks. We try to, we approach companies to come because we think that they are good companies. They're all very investable and hopefully have something rather more substantial than just being popular, I suppose.
Yeah, that's certainly been my impression, having been to the Master Investor Show, obviously prior to the pandemic. It was a great opportunity to actually go around some of the booths, and you actually do get to meet the senior management team, the decision makers, usually people who you don't otherwise get to meet unless, as you say, you're a fund manager or certainly a very substantial institutional investor who's going to be buying a big chunk of stock.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was at the London Trader Show, I think that was the first event I'd been to in ages. And it took me a little while to remember how to say hello to people. There was, when you think about before Christmas, people were genuinely, I was worried about what was going to be possible. I think Omicron has proved to be less damaging than people feared. And I think there is a general sort of opening up, which is very, very welcome. There are going to be a lot of people who I already know are coming partly just to see other people that they know, probably maybe some people that they don't know. But the chance to actually network with other investors is something that we can put on as many webinars and things like that as we like, but that's something that is quite hard to replicate.
Yeah, certainly I've been to a few online conferences with virtual networking facilities and such like during the lockdown, but it doesn't really replace the ability to go around a big venue like the Business Design Center and choose where you want to go and actually have that personal interaction with a large slice of the investment community and a large menu of interesting companies as well.
No, absolutely. I think, and I do think that there is a slightly pent-up demand, I don't know if that's the right word, for to actually see people and interact on a sort of a physical level. We are obviously making the event as COVID secure as we can, but I think there are a lot of people that want to get out there, and the quality of the conversation you can have when you're physically there, I think is demonstrably better.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly looking forward to it myself. It's going to be a great opportunity to get out of the office, so to speak, and to meet a lot of people. You mentioned obviously Jim Mellon. Is there, if you had to go to one presentation, one speech in the course of the day on the 19th, what would be your don't miss this presentation?
Well, you put me on the spot there. The straightforward answer, the one that I think always gains a big crowd is Jim's presentation. He's got a very strong following amongst our audience. So the topic of his talk, I think, is going to be very on point as well. So the title is Transition to a New Investment Era. And it's going to be addressing sort of the very different context in which investors are operating now as compared to the last time we were there in 2019. The others that I would be particularly keen on, I think we've got, as I said, I think Guy Anderson from JP Morgan was very well received when he spoke in 2020 at the virtual event. So I think that will be good. The other one that I think is particularly interesting is the Quoted Data panel session on property investment. I think property is something that a lot of people understand and therefore they invest in it. But there are actually so many different ways of tapping into that market. And again, because of the pandemic, there are new dynamics, investing into retail property as versus residential, for example, looks rather different now, how you do that, who you do that with. So I think that session will be quite informative. It's a topic that people feel they know, but I think it's going to add a lot of value.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. There's been a lot of focus on that over the course, certainly the last 18 months or so. We've noticed that ourselves. So basically, just can you give us a quick summary, of where, when, how to get there, how to get tickets, and
First things first, I guess. Tickets are available from the Master Investor website, so that's masterinvestor.co.uk. It is possible to get free tickets, so they are £20, but through Armchair Trader, there are free tickets available for people using the ticket code Armchair. So please do make full use of that. On the day, so it's a Saturday, the intention being that people who've got jobs are able to attend, as well as the retired and otherwise unemployed. So doors open at 9:15. on the 19th of March, and the first main stage session will be kicking off at 9:30 with Will Frost and his panel to look at market trends and the key things that investors should be factoring in. The final session will be running through till 4:50 and doors close at 5 p.m. There are various competitions and prizes to be won as well, so it isn't just about where do I put my money. There are also some added benefits to being there.
Obviously, the Armchair Trader is going to be there in person as well. We'll have some of our team there to also answer questions or indeed take any criticism you may have as well.
It is it's one of those things that I think, how often do people get a chance to sit down or stand up and talk to the people that they read on a regular basis? I think people like yourself are a valuable resource to private investors. The chance to come along and speak to you and to get your views on any given subject, I think that is an extra incentive. I think it will hopefully make it very much worth people's while coming along.
No, absolutely, and I'll be looking forward to catching up with any of our readers who stop by our booth. We'll have a few members of our team there, so it should be a really interesting day, and we're really looking forward to it.
19th of March, Business Design Centre. I think Angel is the closest tube, in case anyone's wondering. There is a car park, but I'd probably book ahead because I think it only has about 250 spaces. But please, everyone, do come along. I think it's going to be a fantastic day.
Thanks for coming on the podcast to tell us about it today, Tim, and we'll catch you in person on the day.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Armchair Trader podcast. Make sure you visit our website, www.thearmchairtrader.com, for your daily dose of financial markets news and sign up to our free newsletter there.